Big diesel SUVs, a car enthusiast's nightmare. But alas, you need a family car. You look over at your beloved sports car and have a choice to make. Sell the sports car and get a sporty SUV, or keep the sports car and get a bog standard family hauler. What do you pick then? Well, in front of me is a car that genuinely surprised me. Let's get into it. My name's Tom, and you're watching Paragon Cars. Let's go. This is a BMW X5, the 30D to be exact. That means it's pushing 258 brake horsepower and 560 Nm of torque to all four wheels. Not exactly hair-raising figures, but it should be enough even for a rotund car like this. Let's see what she can do on the 30 to 70 sprint. It's actually not bad. In fact, it outclassed the more powerful Range Rover Sport and was only a fraction of a second behind the Stage 1 Range Rover. Bit awkward when you consider the BMW has 50 less horsepower and is only 45 kilos lighter. The interior is typical BMW really, not the flashiest, but it's put together well and actually does everything you want it to do. For me, the iDrive system is still one of the best out there. One option that I think is actually really underappreciated is the extended storage pack. Having a little cubby down by the driver's side is actually surprisingly useful. What really surprised me about this car though was the legroom in the rear. Even people above 6 feet won't feel even remotely cramped back here. Of course, being an SUV, you've also got tons of headroom. Creature comforts on this particular car include heated seats, your own climate, and a perfect armrest, bit of storage, and cup holders that stay out the way when you don't need them. Move to the boot and you'll find a Range Rover-like split tailgate design. I always thought they were a bit of a gimmick, but it does genuinely make it easier to load heavier stuff in. Plus, it stops you from accidentally scraping the bumper. Right, time to get on the road, I think. Right, BMW X5. This is actually the first time I've ever driven one of these. I've driven quite a few BMW X6s. So it's going to be interesting to see how this differs. So far, suspension, steering, throttle pedal, brake all feel the same. The only thing I'm noticing is a couple of rattles coming from the back. I think that is just from the parcel shelf there. One thing I love about BMWs is no matter how big their cars are, they always seem to shrink themselves around you and you just have really nice positive steering feel. And when you go over undulations in the road, you can actually feel it through the steering. It's interesting, an Audi Q7 feels more car-like than this. But this somehow feels like it's going to handle better in the corners. It's a very strange experience. And in terms of parking, visibility is actually really good out of everywhere in the car. Then if you get this M Sport model with a reverse camera and parking sensors, it makes it even easier. You got plenty of steering lock, and the reverse camera is high quality, good refresh rate, parking sensors are accurate. So parking is actually really easy, even though this is a pretty big car. Do you need a 360 camera? Nah, you don't need it. Those are really for just showing off. They're only really useful on like maybe the new X5, where you get that sort of full 3D vision thing. It also tells you how close you are to the curb, but you don't need it in this one. Coming out of junctions, give it half throttle. You've got X-Drive and a torquey diesel, so you get up to speed pretty surprisingly fast actually. And the good thing is you're not waiting for the car to go. That's why I like big torquey diesels, is you ask for the power and it's just there instantly. Right, let's reset our trip computer and see what kind of MPG we can get. We're supposed to get about 45 miles per gallon out of this thing. Realistically, I'm expecting about 38, but we'll have to see. Before we do that, let's have a quick taste of the handling round a roundabout. Right, in Sports Plus, we're going to put the gearbox in Sports as well. That'll drop a couple of gears. Steering's heavier, throttle is more responsive, and the traction control is off, which is pretty surprising for an SUV. It's one thing I like about BMW is they let you have a little bit of fun. Right, foot down. bit of understeer, but then the rear does push you round. It takes a second to go, oh, that's what you want to do, and then it gives you the power to the rear, which is nice. Not quite as sharp as something like a 4 Series Grand Coupe or a 5 Series even, but it still feels dynamic. Having positive steering and quite a bit of feel through all the control surfaces just allows you to have a little bit of fun still. Anyway, let's do the usual, go back into Eco Pro and see what kind of MPG we can get. Right, on our favourite stretch of motorway, this is where the X5 is going to spend most of its time. So what's it like? Well, it's not quite as quiet in here as something like a Audi Q7, but it's almost on par, you know, and when the difference is that small, it really doesn't matter that much. One thing that has surprised me a lot though about the BMW X5 is just how good the visibility is. Of course you can see well out the front and the sides, but the rear 3/4 and just the rear window is massive. So you can see in your blind spot really easily in this thing. In fact, you can actually see slightly better than you can in a VW Golf, which is pretty surprising. Then you've got nice big rear view mirrors, so it aids you a little bit there as well. Dynamically, it's lovely though. You've got the ZF 8-speed gearbox, a buttery smooth inline-6 diesel, and it's just calibrated so well. So if I slow down very slightly, down to like 60 miles an hour here, and you just give it half throttle, it downshifts a couple of gears and it just glides up to 70 miles an hour. It's like this effortless wave of torque, and the engine never feels like it's straining itself, which is really nice. Then in terms of quality, it's fairly good. I mean, it's on par with like an Audi Q7, I think. Slightly better than a Mercedes GLE actually. You get soft touch materials on the door cards and the dash. And then if it's not soft touch materials, it's pretty much always leather. Then you got this lovely brushed aluminium trim, which I really like. And yeah, everything's pretty hard wearing. The only thing I noticed that wears quite quickly is the steering wheel, and that is akin to all BMWs of this era. They seem to wear slightly too quickly, and the finish does come off fairly easily. Even after like 3-4 years, you can see them where they're down to bare leather, which is not that good. So if you do buy one of these, just make sure you look after the steering wheel. But that is the only bit of wear and tear I can see in here. The seats are actually pretty hard wearing, which is nice. Now then, in terms of optional extras, if I only had 3 choices, what would I get? Well, the first thing is actually going to be that Harman Kardon sound system. A, you get a cool looking speaker grille, which would otherwise just be a sheet of plastic, which doesn't look very nice. And B, you get a really good sound system. You get loads of bass, loads of mids, and of course loads of highs. But it's the clarity that is the key thing here, because the standard system is fine. It gets loud, but when you're listening to like your favourite song on Spotify or Apple CarPlay even, you can notice quite a big difference between this and the standard system. This one you can pick out different instruments, whereas the standard system you can't. So it's definitely worth the upgrade. Then the next thing, if you're not an audiophile, it's got to be a panoramic roof, because A, it stretches pretty much all the way to the back of the car, and B, this is a big SUV, and even though it's got big windows out the back, it's still pretty dark in there because obviously they're tinted. So a pan roof is definitely something you're going to want to have. And then the last thing is probably going to be heated seats. I know you could go for the upgraded ProNav screen, but if you can't get that, I would just go for the heated seats because they are leather, they do get cold in winter, and it is something you're just going to want to have. Particular specs that this car has though that I find pretty cool are the digital cockpit, which does look nice, and then if you change drive modes, that's what comfort looks like, and then sport and sport plus look the same. It just turns the traction off in sport plus, but they do look cool, red and aggressive, black and calm, and Eco Pro is like the saving the environment setting, and it tells you how many miles you've gained in fuel by driving efficiently. That's actually my favourite view because it kind of coincides with the way the car drives. Having that little power section there almost feels Rolls-Royce-like. It's like a reserve power bar. And it's telling you you're doing a good job, or a bad job, depending on how you drive. The next thing that I find pretty cool is the heads-up display. These are great in all modern German cars, purely because they're high resolution and they give you loads of information. And the thing is, they aren't just party tricks either, they are genuinely useful on a daily basis. One thing I really like is obviously it shows you your speed and your navigation data, but if I turn the cruise control on, it comes up in the heads-up display as well, showing my speed and whether I'm too close to the car in front or not. If I crouch down, you might be able to just about see it. And the thing is, it's not too big and too bright that it's in the way. You know, some heads-up displays, especially in like Mercedes cars, can be really overwhelming. I noticed in the GLE 53 review, which if you haven't watched, I'll put a link in the top right hand corner up there for it. It had a heads-up display with so many options on it that it was kind of overwhelming. Once you're used to it, it's fine, but if you're not very technologically savvy, shall I say, it can be really overwhelming at first, especially when you don't know how to turn things on and off on it. This one is just much easier to use. It's just speed, cruise control, nav data, that's it. Fairly simple. Right, a couple more miles on the motorway and we're going to see if we can get that 45 mile per gallon figure. We're sitting at 38.4 at the minute, so not too bad. Right, that's our little motorway stint done. We managed 41.7 miles per gallon, which is not bad, and it is still going up. The thing that surprised me though is that the Range Rover managed, I think it was nearly 45 miles per gallon. That's a Range Rover Sport 3-litre diesel. And this wasn't quite as efficient, which shows that they've kind of set this up more for being sporty rather than efficient, I guess. So yeah, I mean, overall though, it's not going to cost you much more at the pumps. It's actually a fairly efficient car considering its size and its weight. But how fun is it? Is it as good as BMW claim it is? Okay then, back into Sports Plus, put the gearbox into Sports as well. Let's see how this X5 handles. Hopefully there's not too much traffic today. It doesn't look like there is. A little squirt. Oh god. Bit of understeer and a bit of rotation. So I'm noticing if I come off the throttle, it rotates, and then when you're at slower speeds, it does let you push the rear end out, which is nice. When you get to higher speeds though, it does kind of rein you back in a little bit. But it's a very neutral chassis. BMW always seem to surprise me, even with their SUVs. Like, how do they make an SUV like this, a normal diesel, like, give you feedback through steering and good chassis dynamics? You know, this isn't like an X5M or anything. It's great though. You know, you can buy a normal car and still have a laugh in it. I mean, it also gives you a lot of confidence. Cracking bit of kit. And it's dry as well. If it was wet weather outside, I mean, you'd be going sideways. Like, properly sideways. Steering's nice and sharp, predictable. Seats hold you in place nicely. Brakes could be better. They do the job, but they're not super duper reassuring. You know the car's going to stop, but it has that kind of like, ooh, the brakes are at their limit kind of feeling. Right, once more. Let's see how we go. It's very neutral. Yeah. I mean, you can feel the rear end moving around, which is nice, but it's not like snappy. It doesn't snap sideways on you suddenly. It's safe but fun. That's what I like about BMWs. Like, I mean, obviously stuff like the BMW M4 is pretty snappy, but they're normal cars. You can be a pretty average driver and still exploit pretty much everything that the car has to offer, which is really nice. And the other thing I love is the car just wraps itself around you. When you're going faster, it kind of shrinks around you more and more and more until you feel like you're driving something pretty small, really. How does she do down a Type B road then? Well, again, it doesn't feel too big, so it kind of does give you a bit of confidence to push it. But the engine really is the star for me. Third gear, yeah? So we'll go from 20 miles an hour in third. Watch how quickly you pick up speed. All that torque just comes in instantly. You go from 20 to 50 in like 2.5 seconds. But the pickup's pretty good. Like if we do a sort of launch, you get a really nice big shove. In round corners, it gives you a lot of confidence to push it. Doesn't understeer, but doesn't oversteer at the same time. It's just predictable. Steering is fantastic. You feel everything that's going on underneath you. And that's really important when you're driving a big SUV like this in a brisk manner. It means you can place the car exactly where you want it. That pickup from third though, that's so impressive. It's just instant, like no throttle, full throttle. It's almost electric in the way it responds. It carries you all the way up to 60 miles an hour as well. Bit of movement there. You know, drop the kids off at school and have a bit of fun on the way home. Okay, of course, a diesel SUV isn't going to replace a sports car, but the fact you can still have fun in one is genuinely baffling to me. I've said before that SUVs should focus on just being SUVs, otherwise they become overly stiff, overly sketchy messes of cars. But maybe I was wrong. BMW, I take my hat off to you. Well done. As always, I hope you enjoyed this review. If you did, give it a like and why not subscribe. As not only can you see more content like this, you can see everything we have for sale, which as usual includes the car in this video. My name's Tom, and you've been watching Paragon Cars. I'll see you on the next one. Goodbye.